No figure on the borderline of history and mythology has wasted more of the historian's time. These are the words of prominent British archaeologist John Noel Linton Myers, speaking about the ongoing, seemingly unending fascination with tales of famed British figure King Arthur, an undeniably important element of the Matter of Britain, a term used to designate medieval literature and legendary stories pertaining to the history of Great Britain. As legend goes, Arthur was a powerful, popular king who led British forces in battle against Saxon invaders in the early 6th century. But is this, along with other stories of Arthur and his beloved Knights of the Round Table, only legend, or is there a true historical basis to the tales? This is the long-running debate that apparently so frustrated Myers. For while Arthurian legend is certainly a hugely influential aspect of classic British literature, the question of its historical basis has quite often overshadowed the realm of simple academic literature analysis. Myers is not alone in his frustration with this. As many other historians are quick to point out, there is no recorded, provable evidence of a real Arthur. In fact, it is much easier to establish how many significant elements of Arthurian legend, such as the love triangle between he, his queen Guinevere, and his most trusted knight Lancelot, or the knight's quest for the Holy Grail, or his battles with his evil sister Morgan Le Fay and his traitorous son Mordred, were in fact gradually added on to the growing legend throughout the centuries, by various poets and authors eager to build the mythology of this classic tale. And yet, this hasn't stopped some historians from attempting to uncover a potential historical basis to at least certain elements of the legend. Sure, maybe the stories of the wizard Merlin, the mystical Lady in the Lake, and Arthur's battles against various monsters and beasts might be myth, they will argue. But that doesn't mean there was never an actual real-life Arthur. For instance, British cultural historian and Arthurian expert Geoffrey Ashe has put forward a theory that the tales of Arthur shared in Geoffrey of Monmouth's 12th century History of the Kings of Britain, one of the most important texts in the development of Arthurian legend, might in fact have been based on the true life exploits of a 5th century Roman-British military leader named Rhetimus, who, in alliance with the declining Western Roman Empire, fought against the Germanic Goths. Ashe's theory has been shared by some historians, but also dismissed by many others. Still, maybe because Arthurian legend is such an enduring aspect of British culture, and maybe because many British people would love to believe their actual history might in fact include such a noble, powerful figure, the desire to find a real-life basis for Arthur has continued over the years. Its most recent significant flare-up occurring in 1998, with the discovery of the Ortogno Stone, a 6th century archaeological artifact found in the ruins of a castle in Cornwall. The inscription on the stone was translated to read, "Artogno, descendant of Paternus Colus, made this." Given that the dating of the stone seemed to match up with the general time frame often associated with the historical Arthur, it wasn't long before some, despite the dismissal of the idea from numerous other historians, theorized that perhaps this name, Ortogno, was in fact a variant of Arthur, and these believers took to calling the Ortogno stone the Arthur Stone. Only 6 years after the discovery of the stone, Hollywood would do its part to add on to the confusion regarding Arthur's potential historical reality, with a new film purporting to tell the true, real-life origins of the legend, and pulling its general basis from the oft-repeated theory that perhaps the real Arthur was a Roman-British soldier, as theorized years before by Geoffrey Ashe. Of course, for this film to really impact the ongoing debate of Arthurian myth versus reality, it would first have to attract an audience in the first place, a quest perhaps as difficult as proving the famed king once truly lived. The year is 2004, and Walt Disney Studios is ready to launch a new potential franchise to join the other classic tales of Arthurian legend with King Arthur. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Yes, the sound of another failed franchise launch means it's another episode of Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, and welcome to Arthurian April, where everything's made up and the points don't matter.
Yes, and as if people need a further introduction, as you'll hear in this episode, you'll soon come to know me as the Failure to Franchise co-host that respects directors' visions, whereas Chris is the guy who just loves corporate product, doesn't mind when the company comes in and just destroys the director's, cut and vision. So all you Snyder bros out there, if you're looking for one of these hosts to go after, it is Chris, because he's a company man, whereas I'm here to fight for the director.
Oh, get the hell out of here.
You'll see what we're talking about.
Okay, fair enough. All right.
But no, this is Arthurian April, as you said. This is a month dedicated to films about King Arthur. Of course, we are bi-weekly, so when we say a month, it's just 2 movies.
Yeah.
But 2 King Arthur films, but 2 very different King Arthur films. Starting today with 2004's King Arthur. Chris, do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, it is directed by Antoine Fuqua, director of Training Day, The Equalizer, most recently The Magnificent Seven, for people that need a refresher. Written by David Franzoni. He actually wrote Gladiator, which we're going to talk about for sure.
Are we? I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe it'll come up. Who knows?
The budget for the film is $120 million. Domestically, it made $52 million, and worldwide, $203 million. So, not the greatest on a $120 million budget. No.
Yeah. By the way, this is just further proof of what I was just saying. Chris, you're like, here you go. You're already putting the digs in on Antoine Fuqua. You said most recently Magnificent Seven. That is Antoine Fuqua Erasure. Most recently The Equalizer Part 2. Thank you very much.
Okay. You know Antoine Fuqua is not going to date you, right? I know you really want to right now.
I'm just saying. I'm fighting for this guy here.
Okay.
We'll have more to say about the Fuqua as we go along.
Sure.
But yeah, so we like to start. I mean, we'll have more to say about this movie's kind of take on King Arthur and everything, of course, when we kind of do a deeper dive on the film. Mm-hmm. But yes, let's talk about, as we like to start, why in 2004 we get to this film. Why a King Arthur movie, and why a King Arthur movie from these filmmakers. And Chris already mentioned it, but I think a very important word for us here is Gladiator.
Yeah.
So Gladiator, for those who somehow don't remember, was a 2000 film that was a surprise, gigantic success. Mm-hmm. It's hard to I kind of remember the probably more than you do, since I'm 38 years older than you, Chris.
Yeah.
I remember more the kind of the nebulous air around the release of Gladiator a little bit, because it was seen as a big risk, because those kind of sword and sandal Hollywood epics hadn't been done in a while. And people were really shocked at how well that movie went over. It was, of course, a gigantic box office hit. I believe I have it here. Yes, it cost $103 million and made $460.5 million. And of course, went on to win a number of Academy Awards, including Best Actor for Russell Crowe and Best Picture. Now, of course, we all know that it should not have beat Traffic or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon for Best Picture. And Chris, don't you come in and say I'm wrong, or else I will pull this podcast over right now.
I would say it's fine to beat Traffic, but Crouching Tiger is it's awesome. So
yeah, Crouching Tiger was the clear winner that year. They gave it the consolation best foreign film, but come on.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, did you see Gladiator in theaters?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I do like Gladiator. Let me be clear. I think Gladiator is awesome. I'm not anti-Gladiator. I was a little confused by the Best Picture win, but whatever. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, Gladiator was our first DVD for our family. Oh, yeah, and it was we never saw it in theaters. It was, I remember, we had got a brand new sound system, and one of my dad's coworkers brought it over and gifted it to us, and we watched it that day. And then my grandpa came over, and we were watching it. We were halfway through it, and he came in, and he's like, first of all, spoilers for Gladiator, okay? So skip ahead if you don't know the ending. But my grandpa walks in, and he goes, "Oh, Gladiator." And we're like, yeah. And he goes, "Oh, wow, this movie's just amazing. It's so sad when he dies at the end." And it was the first time we ever saw Gladiator. We just paused it, turned over, and we're like, this is the first time we've seen this. And anyway, I do love that movie, but it holds just a fun kind of memory in my heart there. So anyway.
Yeah, and so obviously, the talk of that movie at the time was, well, Hollywood is kind of done with these kind of big epics, but then that one, everybody loves it, I mean, I guess not everybody, but most people do.
Sure.
And, it's the kind of success that, of course, Hollywood is well, let's make more of those. Mm-hmm. And where you really see that kind of start is in the next few years, because obviously it takes time for Hollywood to start catching up to a trend. But this film that we're talking about today comes in the middle of a pretty big explosion of this. You look at 2003, you get Last Samurai, which I would throw into that kind of realm of this kind of, older traditional epic story. And in 2004 alone, we get today's film, King Arthur. We get Troy and Alexander. And this continues into next year, 2005, with Ridley Scott coming back again with Kingdom of Heaven. And then you can keep pushing that even forward a little bit. Like, I feel like they never really fully went away after this. Like, Gladiator really was like, that was like the hot moment right there. But, you keep going with things like 300, and then later, attempts to do Hercules films. We'll talk about that someday.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it really did kind of revive what had been a really kind of like worn out, done genre. And I think, for all these producers who were looking to have the next Gladiator, suddenly I'm sure it was everybody was rushing to say, what's the story? Like, what can we do? And King Arthur makes sense as something to turn to, So King Arthur, I mean, obviously Arthurian legend has been around for centuries. Everyone is, at least vaguely familiar with it. And it's not like, this is certainly not Hollywood's first attempt to make a King Arthur film.
No.
The weird thing about King Arthur is that there's not as many King Arthur movies as you would think there would be when you really look into it. I mean, there's a good number, but I would think there would be way more. I don't know if you feel the same way, Chris, but it seems kind of surprising that it's not like something that happens every couple of years.
Totally, and I think it's you kind of self-described yourself a while ago as being quite a fan of Arthurian legend. My level of knowledge for it is quite low, as with most things ever. So I like to sometimes be the dumb one in this moderately dumb partnership here. But my range of knowledge goes from like the Sword and the Stone, a kid in King Arthur's court, and like Transformers: The Last Knight. You know what I mean? Like I understand there's the Knights of the Round Table, there's Lancelot, there's King Arthur, there's there's a love triangle, that sort of stuff. But I'm not super familiar with like the quote unquote historical accuracies or whatnot, which definitely this film in particular wants to get into.
Yeah, and that's the strange thing. So there's two things that surprise me about King Arthur, and particularly when you look at King Arthur and Arthurian legend as it translates to cinema, is that there's not more films of it, and that there's not that many good films of it.
Right.
It's and I think I kind of get why, and I'll talk about that in a second because that is important for this because it really ties into this one. But yeah, I think there's kind of been this long talk about how Hollywood really struggles with making a really effective, really beloved kind of huge success King Arthur movie. And there's some bright spots. I think Sword in the Stone is a really fun animated film.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I have like a soft spot for Excalibur from the 80s, but revisiting it, I realize it's not necessarily that great of a movie.
Oh, I like the Merlin stuff with Sam Neill. Was that a movie? Was that a miniseries? What was that?
That was like a TV movie, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's been King Arthur shows for sure. There was the one called, I think it was called Camelot, that had Eva Green as Morgana Le Fay. That lasted only like one season. And then that was like at the same time as that show, there was also a Merlin show running. So yeah, and of course we had the musical Camelot in the 60s. There's this one King Arthur movie, I wish I had the name in front of me, but everyone says it's like the best King Arthur movie. I believe it's from like the 50s or something, and I found out about it today. Like I wasn't even that familiar with it.
Okay.
And it made me want to kind of go back and watch it. But that's kind of sad when like maybe the best King Arthur movie is still from like that decade, And I think the issue with that, and this really ties into what we're going to say about this film, is I think the difficulty of adapting King Arthur is that, okay, so like I said, I really like Arthurian legend. Well, the thing about Arthurian legend is there's no one legend. Arthurian legend is like built of all, this is like a legendary character that numerous authors, historians, poets, people have written stories about, told stories about. It's been adapted and readapted, changed. There's no singular Arthur story. So every time people decide to make King Arthur, they're kind of plucking all the elements they want to use, right? And it's not as like straightforward as saying, I'm going to make a new Batman film, or I'm going to make a new Spider-Man film. Of course, with those franchises and those characters, we also see like evolutions and changes, but it's nothing like King Arthur, where when you get into like the history of the King Arthur legend, there's a lot of debate about which parts of the legend are actually, true is a weird word to use here, because we're going to talk about if there's any truth at all.
Right.
But also like, certain elements like Lancelot and that love triangle with Lancelot and Guinevere, that's not from the original King Arthur stories. That was actually added in by a 12th century French writer who comes along and adds that part in. And then suddenly it becomes like this accepted part of the story. It's like, well, okay, but see, now you're seeing how all these things are kind of other, authors' additions. Even something like Morgana Le Fay. Sometimes, she's just entirely evil. Sometimes she's evil but redeems herself at the end. A character like Mordred, sometimes he is Arthur's like nephew, sometimes he's his incestuous son from Morgana Le Fay. Excalibur, sometimes it's pulled from this, sometimes it's the sword in the stone and he pulls it out of the stone. Sometimes it's given to him by the lady in the lake. There's like all these different things. There's all these different versions of the story. So it's difficult to say, I'm going to make the King Arthur movie.
Right. And that's what I guess like the difference with this one is Jerry Bruckheimer comes along, famous, gigantic mega producer, and is like, you know what, let's make this one as, again, like you said, historically accurate, quote, and see what to do. I guess in that case, it would be like, this one would be a different take, even still, because they wanted to ground it as humanly possible.
Yeah, and I wonder where, because I don't know, I'm sure you probably saw this too, Chris, but apparently like this version, this 2004 King Arthur was a film that Michael Bay had been developing for quite a while. And so
you know me, I know everything Michael Bay does.
Yeah. So this was like a dream project of his, it sounds like, because he was developing it for like 4 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And I think he only walked away from it because of other obligations.
He walked away from the budget.
Was that what it was? Okay.
Yeah, it sounded like either it was getting... I can't see it being too inflated for Michael Bay, or maybe they just didn't want to give him what he wanted to make it.
Yeah. So I wonder if that... I find it hard to believe that like the historical aspect was always his take on it. I wonder if him walking away from it is when they decided to go that route and say, okay, let's sell this like historical thing now.
Right.
But maybe we shouldn't talk about that too much, because I think the historical aspect is more interesting to talk about in like the body of the film itself.
Sure.
Maybe instead we should just talk about some of the other names involved. So you mentioned Antoine Fuqua. Let's briefly talk about that, because once Michael Bay is gone, Fuqua's a very interesting director to plug in instead, Mm-hmm. So especially at this point in his career. So this is following, this is 2004. At this point, Antoine Fuqua had directed The Replacement Killers in 1998, which is kind of known as like the first Chow Yun-Fat American action film. Kind of a little bit forgotten today,
Right.
Maybe rightfully so. It's not that great. Bait in 2000, which is an action comedy with Jamie Foxx. I don't know if another one I feel like is almost completely forgotten to me. I mean, I don't see people talking about Bait that much. 2001, although this is where he enters like the big time fray with Training Day.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. I love Training Day. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't like Training Day, you're not allowed to listen to the rest of this episode.
Yeah, you're just wrong.
Yeah. And then in 2003, the year before this, he does Tears of the Sun, which is a really kind of boring action movie with Bruce Willis. Mm-hmm. But like none of those movies seem to suggest the person to do like a night, epic, large scale action film. And I'm sure that was probably part of the appeal to him. I know that was kind of one of the exciting elements about it. It's always kind of interesting when a director you don't expect to do something like this walks in. But I do remember him saying a lot of the right things in the build up to it. Like, it certainly sounded like this was a genre he wanted to really dip his toe into, and he seemed to like respect kind of, the obligations of Arthurian legend. But let me just ask in general, where do you fall on Antoine Fuqua as a director?
Honestly, I've only seen a couple of his stuff. Like, again, Training Day for sure. I had seen Tears of the Sun with my dad one time on an overnight stay at a motel. I remember being pretty bored by it.
Yeah.
I have yet to jump into the Equalizer franchise. I know that I've been told that they're very, very fun.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. I haven't seen them either, but I know it's people that I respect seem to enjoy them.
Yeah. And then the other one is the Magnificent Seven that I hinted at, which is kind of vaguely we're going to talk about probably when it comes to this movie. But
did you like that movie though, or?
I never saw it.
Oh, okay.
I just know what it is, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. It's not as good as the original Magnificent Seven, which is not as good as Seven Samurai. Sure. It's like this is like diminishing returns every time, but his version is pretty fun. Yeah.
He makes some fun action movies. Like I'm looking here, and Olympus Has Fallen. Like I like that movie. I like that Has Fallen trilogy or whatever is fun as shit. But I guess he started that one, right? That's just
So what I would say about him, and I don't mean this to be negative at all. I think this is a good thing. And there are directors who would probably wish they could have a career like this. Mm-hmm. he seems like one of the better, like, workman-like directors.
Yeah.
Right? I'm looking at his filmography and I'm saying, I don't know that I see that there's an Anton Fuqua style that I could identify. I think he's someone who can actually adapt his style to like what the genre kind of needs. Because I don't think you would watch King Arthur and be like, that's the guy that made Training Day.
No.
But I also don't think you would watch Training Day and think that's the guy that made Olympus Has Fallen, you know, or the Magnificent Seven for that matter. I think he's actually able to kind of adapt his style to what the movie needs. And I think that means that he'll probably never be looked at as like, you know, a Ridley Scott or something.
An
but
auteur.
but he's going to keep working. You know, I feel like he's a guy, if I had a project that I felt like had a success, you know, a chance of being a fairly moderate success, and I just needed someone who I knew knows how to handle a big budget and knows how to bring something in on time, I could see why you'd be like, get Antoine Fuqua.
Totally.
You know, it seems like he can probably deliver the product. So yeah, I don't mean that to be negative. I think that's a, you know, it's a good thing.
I agree. He's dependable is the word maybe.
Yeah.
And makes like solid stuff. It's like I always have this debate with some friends, and I think maybe even we have had this debate over the years. Or not even debate, because I think we agree, is the whole like Buffy versus Angel series. You know, like Buffy has way higher highs than Angel, but it definitely has way lower lows. And while Angel is like all the way through, it's just like very, very, very good. You know?
Well, season 4 might come in to argue with that a little bit.
This is also something that was brought up by a friend of mine as well. Is yes, the Connor stuff can it sucks. You're right. Okay, never mind. I take it back.
Not even necessarily the Connor stuff. Justice for Connor. I don't mind Connor. I'm talking more about the Cordelia stuff. And now we know there's even worse reasons for that. But let's not get into that. Let's talk about it. And so let's talk about the cast now, because this is obviously one of the more interesting elements of this film. And in fact, I should like one of the first trivia bits I want to talk about just because it's so funny. We should clarify something right off the bat here. This is probably going to be like another one of those movies where some people might come in and say, what are you guys talking about? How do you know that they even wanted this to be a franchise? And I'm going to be honest, Chris and I have already talked about this. You know, these hard set rules we set out for ourselves, maybe it's just because we're already like, let's just talk about some movies we want to talk about.
Yeah.
But we're starting to be a little bit willing to be more kind of speculative in this.
Sure.
And I think Chris and I are talking about this. My assumption is, especially Jerry Bruckheimer. Jerry Bruckheimer as a producer seems to be like someone who, if something is successful, he's going to make a sequel to it.
Yes.
And I don't think Jerry Bruckheimer signs off to do a big budget King Arthur movie unless he sees the potential of more. And I think the ultimate indication of that is probably one of the funniest trivia bits about this movie is who Anton Fuqua wanted to cast for King Arthur and Jerry Bruckheimer's call on that. Chris, do you want to tell the fans about this?
Yes, definitely.
The fans, the listeners, sorry.
Yeah. All 7 listeners of ours. Here's some trivia for you. When Antoine Fuqua took over the project, he wanted Daniel Craig to play Arthur, but was overruled by producer Jerry Bruckheimer, who believed that Clive Owen was going to be cast as James Bond, which would greatly increase the film's commercial shelf life on DVD. So yeah, they wanted to do Daniel Craig because they thought Clive Owen was be Bond, and then Daniel Craig becomes Bond, and Clive Owen stumbles around for a decade.
Clive Owen goes on to be one of those guys who seemed like always on the cusp of being a big star and never totally quite got there.
By the way, respectfully, I really like Clive Owen, so respectfully.
Oh, and I'll go even further with respectfully. I agreed with Jerry Bruckheimer at the time. A lot of people, including me, thought Clive Owen was like the shoo-in to be the next Bond. So you look at Clive Owen at this time. So this is 2004. Clive Owen is not even at this point like a household name, you know, or as close as Clive Owen's ever been to being a household name. You know, he got a lot of acclaim for the 1998 film Croupier, and that's a movie that like nerdy film fans like me saw, and not, you know, it was no mainstream success. Yeah. But, you know, nerds like me would watch it and go, that guy could be Bond. You know, and then he starts to get a little bit, you know, you start to get some traction with him. In 2002, he plays the professor in The Bourne Identity, which is just like, he barely has any lines. You know, he's just kind of this like antagonistic character. It really is like first starting to like, okay, now people are really starting to pay attention to him is the year before, 2003, with the film I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. But again, we're talking about a movie that, let me just click into this. That is a movie that made $490,000 in the box office. It just got some like critical attention, you know? So it was definitely the thing where like, oh, I think this guy's so cool. I bet you Hollywood's going to pluck him to be the next Bond. And that's obviously what Bruckheimer is thinking. So Bruckheimer comes in and says, no, get that guy. Because it'll increase this movie's like shelf life on the DVD stand. But I also think that speaks to if we can lock him in, we can make more King Arthur films with him, because he'll be James Bond and King Arthur. There's no way I just have to believe that. So we get Clive Owen here, and as we talk about the film, we'll talk about that, and maybe we can also speculate about how we think Daniel Craig would have done in the role instead. But
he probably would have hated making the movie and telling everybody that he hated it and getting super, super rich because of it, and then being dragged and chewing through his chains to coming back for King Arthur 2, and also bitching about it. So
yeah,
that's probably what he
Of course, when you make a King Arthur movie, you also have to cast the Knights of the Round Table. And this is where things get interesting, because this is a pretty impressive group.
This is an awesome cast. Like, it really, I have never seen this movie before, so I was genuinely surprised as who was popping up in how many people? There's 7 of them? 8 of them? 7 of them?
In this film, for the Knights, there are 7 of them.
Seven. Yeah.
And that's including Arthur.
Oh, correct.
Yeah. So 6 main knights, and let's talk about them. So first of all, let's talk about our boy Lancelot.
Sure.
The other secondary character in the Arthurian legends, the bafflingly named.
I know.
Chris, do you know how to pronounce this name?
I'm gonna try.
Because I do, and I think it's like insane. Okay. So let's spell it for our listeners first of all. So this is you all know this actor. He played Mr. Fantastic in the 2 Fantastic Four films from Tim Story. His name is spelled. His first name is Ioan, and his last name is spelled Gruffud. Ian Gruffud? No.
Yeah, I was gonna say Ian Gruffud.
Yeah, that is not what it is.
No way.
Yeah, you want me to tell you how to pronounce his name?
Yeah. You go.
Yoan Griffith.
Okay, he needs to change that right now.
That's probably why he's not a bigger name.
That's unfortunate. Who in the right mind? What agent was like, yeah, let's keep this?
I mean, to be fair, like, we're not to show, it's a Welsh name, and it's just like,
I know,
but it is. It's when you look at it, it's just like, I don't know, like, because I'm a dumb American, I look at that and like that does not compute in my head.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a period where when he was first coming around, where I was definitely calling him Ian Gruffud, and then I was like, Yoan Griffith. All right.
I've been calling him that for like 16 years.
Yeah. So he's Lance. I believe this was post Fantastic Four, the first one.
No, it was before, because Fantastic Four came out 2005.
Okay, so this is like right before. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so now we get into. Actually, I'm going to save 2 of them for the end, because we want to lump 2 of them together.
Sure.
As Gawain, of course, who people will probably know from the famous Arthurian story Gawain and the Green Knight, we have Joel Edgerton. Very, very early Joel Edgerton appearance for us. As Bors, kind of the I'd say comic relief of the film, we get the great Ray Winstone. As Dagonet, the big kind of lumbering muscle of the group, we get Ray Stevenson from Punisher Warzone. That's what I like to credit.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. And then, interestingly enough, as Galahad and Tristan, we get Hugh Dancy and Mads Mikkelsen.
Yes.
And this is a big part of the reason I'm surprised this movie has not kind of resurfaced in a bigger way in recent years, just off of this alone. Because for those of you who don't know, Hugh Dancy and Mads Mikkelsen also go on to star in the show Hannibal as Will Graham, Hugh Dancy, and Hannibal Lecter, Mads Mikkelsen.
Yep.
And that's like a really cool, two-hander show with this bizarre, somewhat romantic almost, but antagonistic relationship between these two. They're great together. They clearly loved working together. It's really fun to watch them, behind the scenes and in interviews, and they're still trying to get another season going. And here you see them as two Knights of the Round Table. So that was like a surprise to you?
Yeah, big time. And I was a huge fan of Hannibal. I'm pretty sure you were too. Like I watched it from day one on NBC, right? Mm-hmm. And then they kept pushing it further and further up the timetable.
Yeah, and they showed them out of order too, and they didn't even show one episode. And
yes, it was getting. They didn't respect that show as much as the fans did, but it's extremely gory, and I don't have a soft stomach. Is that what I'm trying to say? What am I trying to say?
I don't know. Are you saying you're a wimp, or are you saying you're tough? I don't know.
No, I'm tough. I'm tough. Obviously, I'm tough.
Okay.
Please, I'm the toughest one here.
You don't have a weak stomach.
I don't have a weak stomach. I screw up idioms all the time, so there's that one. But I don't have a weak stomach. But that show, I don't think I've ever eaten anything while watching.
Yeah, and the thing you always want to like make clear too when you talk about it is that because obviously one of them like, oh my god, I can't believe they got away with that level of violence in network TV.
Yeah.
But it's not just the violence. That show is also beautiful.
Yes.
I mean, just like that's up there with like Twin Peaks is just like one of the most cinematic shows of all time. Where you're like, wow, they really put a lot of effort into this, and like, yes, it's bloody and gory, but those murder tableaus are just so like breathtaking to see,
And just like the endless montages of Mads cooking and preparing food, and like knowing that it's made of people, and it's just like it's so gross, and like you said, it's absolutely beautiful to watch.
And how great is Mads Mikkelsen? I mean, like many people, I went into that show like kind of apprehensive, being like, hey, Anthony Hopkins, he's Hannibal, and I still, don't get me wrong, I still love Silence of the Lambs. I also like Ridley Scott's Hannibal, but today, if you ask me who's Hannibal Lecter, Mads Mikkelsen is Hannibal Lecter to me now. I think he took over that role for me.
I actually met Mads Mikkelsen at a Comic-Con years ago. I got him to sign my Casino Royale DVD, and I told him how much I loved the movie The Hunt. Yeah. And he was super cool. He was like, "Oh wow, you saw that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "That for anybody listening, The Hunt is one of his Danish films." And he said to me, he goes, "We make movies like this," and he pointed at Casino Royale to get people to watch movies that we do at home. And I was like, "That was super cool." And he was awesome. Took a picture with me. He's just a cool guy.
He seems like a really cool guy. Like it's interesting like how intense he usually comes across on screen, and then if you like watch interviews or check him on social media, he seems like a very goofy person.
Yeah, like I saw, and this was all like before Star Wars or Marvel too. Like this is when he was just like working, Yep.
And then continuing with our still going on impressive cast as the important Guinevere, who's of course the third element of that famous Arthurian love triangle. We have Keira Knightley. Fresh off of Pirates of the Caribbean success. So this is like a good get at this time.
I'm actually shocked.
Jerry Bruckheimer probably obviously just had her like, locked in.
Speed dial.
Yeah.
This is actually a big reason why it's weird that I never watched this movie. I actually worked at the movie theater when this movie was out. Because you actually reminded me by saying Alexander and Troy. I remember being, at Cineplex Odeon when those movies were out. And obviously I had a huge crush on Keira Knightley. I mean, I'm like the perfect age for when she came on the scene with Pirates of the Caribbean. So I'm like shocked I didn't go see this at all.
Well, I don't remember the timing of those three films, but maybe Alexander and Troy were the reason you didn't go see King Arthur.
That's a great point. Yeah, maybe you're right.
And then just two more names I want to mention. Well, I mean, Stephen Dillane as Merlin. Not like to me, we know him now. At this time, I don't think anyone really knew who Stephen Dillane was.
No.
What's interesting now to us is now we know him as Stannis from Game of Thrones.
Wait. What?
Yeah, Merlin in this was played by Stannis.
Hold on.
Did I just blow your mind?
No shit. I couldn't figure out who the fuck that guy was. He's covered in just like dirt the whole movie, and blue makeup or whatever. And I was like, I was just like, oh, he's just like an actor. Again, respectfully. But that is so funny. That's Stannis Baratheon. Wow.
Yeah, that's Stannis, and he's also Thomas Jefferson in the John Adams miniseries. So he goes on to do some more interesting stuff like after this. I guess like he played Leonard Wolfe in 2002's The Hours, which is obviously a big deal. But but he, to me, like I've seen The Hours, but not enough to like kind of really remember it super well. And like so to me, like when I went into this film, like he wasn't somebody that was necessarily clicking with me. But to be fair, at this time, neither were Joel Edgerton or Hugh Dancy or most of these people. Right? Sure. And then in our two main villain roles, as the father and son invading Saxon leaders, we have the awesome Stellan Skarsgård as Cerdic, and Till Schweiger as his son Cynric. I don't even know if those names are ever spoken in the film. I don't think they are.
They're not actually. Yeah, no, they're not.
Yeah, but Till Schweiger, most I think like American fans would primarily remember as playing Hugo Stiglitz in Inglourious Bastards. And then Stellan Skarsgård just is like the man. I love Stellan Skarsgård. Yeah,
in literally everything he's in, he's great.
Yeah, you've never seen him bad, right?
No,
like he's one of those never bads.
I like that term. That's a good term. I like that term.
I stole that from Kumail Nanjiani, actually.
Oh, well,
I just heard him. I was listening.
Now I'm not going to say that anymore.
Well, I was just saying. I'm going to give credit where credit's due. I'm not going to act like I invented it. I just recently heard Kumail Nanjiani refer to Liev Schreiber as a never bad, and I was like, that's true. And I would also say Stellan Skarsgård is in there as well.
Yeah, that's a great term. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, let's steal it. Let's just take it.
Yeah, it's ours. Fuck you, Kumail.
What's Kumail going to do? Yeah, he got all jacked, but come on. I mean, have you seen us? Come on.
Yeah.
We got you notice we don't talk about this very often, Chris, but we got in like MCU shape just to do this podcast. It wasn't even for a movie. We just like got ripped just to do Failure to Franchise. We don't talk about that enough.
I lift my mic up and down while we do this every single time.
Oh, I'm bench pressing my entire desk while I'm recording. Yeah.
My man. How many sets?
Never stop. Let's see. It depends on how long the episode is. If it's good, like a good discussion, I can get in about 45 reps. I'd say.
Nice. In one set.
Yeah.
Oh, my man.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh boy. All right. So do we have any, that's a very cool cast. We got our director in place. We got our mega producer. I like Jerry Bruckheimer. How about you? I mean,
yeah. I'm a Bay guy. You know I like Jerry Bruckheimer.
And then we'll get to this. As you said, we got David Franzoni, the writer of Gladiator, one of the writers. As the sole writer here. And we even got, for including like keeping the Gladiator connection going, we got our boy Hansi coming in to do the music, and I'm sure we'll talk about that as well.
Hani Z, as he likes to be called.
Yeah. All right. So, do you have anything more to say about this, or should we just dive into 2004's King Arthur?
No, I'm good to go.
All right, let's go.
We hang up on everybody. We just end the podcast.
That was a fun intro, though.
Yeah.
For centuries, historians believed that the tale of King Arthur and his knights was only a legend. But the myth was based on a real hero who lived 1,600 years ago.
My father told me great tales of you. Fairy tales. People so brave, so selfless that they cannot be real. Arthur and his knights.
My duty is to my men.
To slaughter your people.
Mark my face. It will be the last thing you see on this earth. My power shall be with you wherever you go. Able to fly without wings. On this day, if this be our destiny, so be it.
In the 5th century AD, the declining Roman Empire is withdrawing from Britannia, where the native Woads, led by Merlin, stage an insurgency. A group of Sarmatian knights and their half-British Roman commander, Artorius Castus, known as Arthur, have fulfilled their 15-year-long obligation to Rome and are preparing to return home until they are ordered to complete one final mission: rescue Alecto, the young son of an important Roman family who is a viable candidate to be future pope. Arthur and his remaining men, Lancelot, Tristan, Galahad, Bors, Gawain, and Dagonet, reluctantly accept the mission as the invading villainous Saxons are hot on their trail.
So that's the basics. Obviously, we'll get into some more elements in terms of how the bad guys fall in and what's Guinevere's part to play in this. But that's the basic version. So, okay, let's talk about this version of King Arthur. Chris, you alluded to this at the top, and so there's something very significantly different about this version of King Arthur as opposed to many of the other ones we addressed, like the Excaliburs, the Sword and the Stones, the King Arthur movie we're going to talk about next time. And that is that this version of King Arthur purports to be much more historically accurate. That's how it was sold. That's what the beginning of the film actually tells you. In fact, I have, let me pull it up here, the opening text to the film. I wanted to read this. So we are told at the beginning on screen, historians agree that the classical 15th century tale of King Arthur and his knights rose from a real hero who lived 1,000 years earlier in a period often called the Dark Ages. Recently discovered archaeological evidence sheds light on his true identity. And this film is meant to be that story. This is the story of the actual story of that led to the King Arthur legends. And the film was heavily marketed that way. The poster says the untold true story that inspired the legend. Here's the thing. That's all bullshit.
Yeah.
And that ultimately, I think, really became an albatross around the neck of this film because people kind of had it in their sights already when this came out. Historians kind of like, mocked it quite a bit because they were, rightfully coming in and saying there's still a pretty huge debate about if Arthur is a real person at all, with most historians agreeing, or most historians, I would say most historians agreeing he's not. He's more of like a legendary character, kind of maybe amalgamated from like real things, but there's like no real basis there. The theory that this is like a true story is like kind of really kind of more niche in the historical realm. And then the strange thing is for a film that purports to be the more historically accurate version, this film is like playing loose and fast with history anyways. It's like it's not even getting its own historical facts right in terms of like when they're placing the film, when they're saying the Romans left Britain, they that's not the right time period in this. They call this the Dark Ages, but actually the Dark Ages started like quite a few years after when this film takes place. The way they depict like the Woads is not accurate. The Woads were not actually called the Woads; they were called the Picts. And Antoine Fuqua is on record as saying the reason they didn't call them Picts was just because he thought Picts sounds weird, so he changed it to the Woads.
Okay, yeah.
So I mean, it's you just have to get that out of the way because we don't want to talk too much about that. But obviously, that's the giant hook of this film is. This is a non-magic, non-mythological based King Arthur film. This is meant to be a grounded, realistic film. We're showing us like this is the stuff that became the King Arthur legend. And we'll talk about how successful it is in a moment, but that's what we have to address. So Chris, I think you already know how I feel about this because we talked about it before, although you don't know if my opinions change on this watch. I will say this is my first time watching it in a long time.
Sure.
But why don't I'm going to let you go first because I'm interested to hear what you thought of King Arthur as someone who approached this from a first-time watch. And we should say, let's get this out of the way too, Chris and I actually watched two different versions of this movie.
Yes.
This is what I was alluding to earlier. Chris watched the PG-13 theatrical cut, and I watched the extended Anton Fuqua director's cut, which is 20 minutes longer and much more violent. But yeah.
Well, and that's I chose the PG-13 one just out of pure laziness. And I'm glad we did this though because it's going to actually shed some light. Yeah, well, it should also shed some light on my faults with or my issues with the movie. So in general, like I said, I am not an Arthurian legend guy. I don't know much about it. I know the basics. I know the Sword and the Stone, yada yada, Merlin, magic, all that stuff. So knowing that this movie was dropping all that, I was like, okay. So I was just kind of going in very, very open. And I started, honestly, like loving it. I really did. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I was all in. I was like, and you know what it comes down to, especially, is the knights. Like, obviously. Like, I mean, it just sounds so vague, but I mean, like we said, the cast of characters we have are awesome actors. And there is an immediate chemistry between everybody involved. There's immediate camaraderie. Because I was surprised that the movie starts out with a young Lancelot, or whatever, or young Arthur, or whatever, and then it says, 15 years later, it does a huge time jump, right? And it just kind of skips.
Can we just talk about that, right? Because that's the first really dumb thing in the movie. So let's just, it starts with, as you said, it's at the beginning we see a very young Arthur. So let's see, as we talk about things, let's just talk about the things that don't make any sense, because there's quite a few of them.
Okay.
One of the first things is, Lancelot starts the movie with like this voiceover, explaining that the Knights of the Round Table are Sarmatian. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But Sarmatians in real life are like they are Iranian. None of these actors look Iranian at all, right? No. But they are basically conscripted into the Roman military. They're taken as young children from their families and given a 15-year service. And after 15 years, they're meant to be freed. And so that's where Gawain and Galahad and Lancelot all come from. As you mentioned earlier, Arthur is a half Roman, half British young boy who is told that you will be their commander. And then the film does this like 15-year jump. It says 15 years later, and we cut from what I would say is like, what, a 9 or 10-year-old Arthur
Yeah.
to Clive Owen, who was 40 years old when he made this film. And I want to make clear, he's not like a 40-year-old who looks like he could pass his 30. He looks 40 in this.
Yeah.
Now, maybe they just had a really rough 15 years. I'm sure they did. But I don't know that I believe that boy aged into Clive Owen in 15 years. So that made me laugh right off the bat. Okay,
Yeah.
But keep going, yeah.
Yes. But that is really funny when you put it like that. Especially when you think about like even like Ray Winstone.
Yeah, it's just
weird.
it's like
that's bizarre.
What I don't get is like, if you're a filmmaker and you're faced that and you're making up your history anyways, right? As we said.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: is like, this movie's not tied to actual history, no matter what they say. So if you're gonna play loose and like with the rules, why not say they had a 25-year service or a 30-year service? Make it look like make this cast look like it makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
Like, none of them look like they're only 15 years removed from being little kids. But whatever. All right, go ahead.
Well, just overall, I think the feel of the movie I really liked. Like, again, I can't say enough about the cast and how well they work together, but there's definitely a lack of... like, the script is an issue for sure, but again, it relies on the strength of the actors. I loved the look of it, the foggy, windy, snowy griminess of it all. I liked all that. It was probably fucking miserable to shoot.
No, I read that it looks very cold, right? But I read that
Yeah.
this was actually filmed in like an unseasonably like warm season in Ireland.
Oh, I don't know what's worse then. Maybe it is. That might be worse.
That was
being
probably
hot.
still miserable, but that
Yeah.
means that they did a really good job on like color correction and stuff in this film.
Oh, for sure.
And we were talking about the cast. We should mention the other important member of the cast, and that is the sound effects of wind. I've never heard so much wind sound dubbed into a film as this movie.
Yes. A+ for the wind. But yeah, no, I overall, like, I was into it. I thought it was fun. Like, I don't know. I really for about halfway through, I loved it. And then there was which we'll talk about, is there's this like battle or fight scene on ice on like a frozen lake, which is far and away the best part of the movie. It's awesome. It's just so good. But then what I started to see, Trev, is the editing. So I watched the PG-13 cut.
Yeah.
And I really felt like I was watching the PG-13 cut.
Yeah.
There is so much chaotic editing that it becomes frustrating. There's even this scene where we're going to do a little bit of jumping around in this one too, so unfortunately, but I mean that's kind of I think the way we have to. But there's this scene where you meet the villain, and the villain is like they've kind of pillaged this village. Pillaged a village. And one of the guys is like going to rape a woman. And then the villain's like, nah, you know, we're not raping anybody, whatever, and gets mad at the guy, right? And then he's like, seems to walk away from him, but no, he unsheaths his sword, and then he fucking just slices him, right? And like, it's a great moment if you see it. It is so strange how it's cut, that it's like so obviously hiding the violence. And so much so you realize it because all their swords are super bloodied up. But yet there's no, you know, we both hate CGI blood. Like, I think most people hate CGI blood in movies. But it's something that was needed in this. And I guess from looking at, you know, the production and the history on this, it was actually removed.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, like they
I'll
built...
talk about it, yeah.
Okay, cool. Like they had squibs. They had this. They had CGI blood thrown in. They had some vicious stuff in there, which I have not seen because I watched the PG-13 cut. So the long and short of it is, did I like this movie? I did like it, and I do like it. I was on the teeter-totter of loving it, but I could just see the seams of the film, and that started to take me out of it when the action is so good, but it's hiding something so obviously.
I will say right now, I'm very relieved to hear you liked it. I wasn't.
Cool.
I kind of.
Okay.
Well, I didn't really want this one to be contentious, but I kind of actually expected it to be, because like I've felt like a long time for a long time I've felt like in a position of having to be a defender of this film. This is a movie that has a very, very low critical score.
Yeah.
It's a movie that when you look into it, people really seem to hate this movie, and I'm going to talk about some of the reasons they hate them, because I think some of them are silly. But I also just feel like, I can, it's, when it comes down to personal taste, some of it is just maybe justified. And I've had to figure out like what do I like about this movie? And I'll talk about that. So yeah, in my rewatch, I will say that I'm not sure coming back to it now after probably like 15 years or so since last seeing it. I don't know if I loved it as much this time as I thought I remembered loving it, but I do still think it's quite good. And I think it's much better than its reputation suggests. It's another one where I'm like, just as many of our characters die in the Battle of Baden Hill, I will die on the hill of King Arthur is a good movie. A great movie? No, not necessarily. But a good movie. And
dude, it's so close to being a great movie. Like, this is
so close. And to your point, though, I will say, if anybody listens to this and decides to watch King Arthur, I will say, do what I do, and yes, get your hands on that director's cut.
Yeah.
Because yes, Chris, like one of the things I can address with complete certainty, as we said, the director's cut is 20 minutes longer. So first of all, you get a little bit more character development. Some scenes are reshuffled. There's scenes happen at different times. Like I know, like the sex scene between Arthur and Guinevere comes at a different moment in the film. But yes, this is not digital blood. I'm not going to say that this is like Dead Alive or anything. It's not the bloodiest film ever, but you are definitely losing a lot of violence in the version you watched, because I'll just give you an example. Let me tell you some of the things you didn't see. In our very first battle scene, when Arthur and his knights fight off Merlin and the Woads when they are attacking that caravan, there is a moment where one of the that's the Woads, right? Yep. But one of the Woads is holding up a severed head of one of the people from the caravan, and as he's holding up the severed head, one of the knights rides up behind him on his horse and decapitates him. So you get a bad guy, not even a bad guy. Where we later learn they're not bad, but we get a combatant holding a severed head, decapitated. Wow. We also get an arrow like right to an eye in that sequence. Later on in the Battle of Baden Hill, a lot of like flying blood, a lot of like hacked limbs, like limbs hacked off. So yeah, it was definitely shot to be an R, and it is quite not extreme, but just definitely more intense. Because as you said, when you can actually show the violence, now the editing in some of the battle scenes is still pretty chaotic, but I think that's what Fuqua was going for.
Sure.
You know? But it definitely isn't pulling the punches like the version you saw.
It's interesting too that you say that, and that sounds so like it's so funny you said Dead Alive as well, because again, that's a Peter Jackson movie, and what I was about to say is that this movie at times really reminded me of, obviously, Gladiator, of course, Gladiator, but in its action and its hordes of bad people, quote unquote, I was really reminded of like the Uruk-hai from Lord of the Rings. Like the way it's shot, it feels like Bruckheimer and Fuqua were like, okay, see what they did in Lord of the Rings? Let's bring this into King Arthur. I really felt that way. So like when you say a scene where, an oddly comedic scene, really, is when somebody's holding up a severed head and then gets his head severed. That seems like something Peter Jackson would have shot, in like the Rohan or something. But that's interesting. That's definitely more gruesome. I stayed away from knowing any of the changes, by the way. So this is definitely all brand new information.
Well, and it's true because I was watching it. So I saw this in the theaters. So I don't remember what my memory was. Like, obviously, I liked it enough in the theaters that I went on to buy the DVD. But I do have like a vague memory of getting the DVD, and and this was back when you had to wait a while for the DVD to come out.
Sure.
But I remember even back then, like watching that version, and being like, "This is clearly better." And it's not that Chris and I are being like those kind of idiots who are just saying it's just better because there's blood.
Yeah.
It's that, as Chris was alluding to, this is a film that when you watch it, it's clearly it is meant to be adult. It's meant to be like brutal. And when you strip that brutality out of it, you actually are losing something, because they are going for this like really down and dirty take on the story. And it shouldn't be sanitized. It shouldn't be like a PG-13 movie. PG-13 King Arthur movies should be the ones that have dragons and magic. This is meant to be like a more like, down to earth R-rated take. So it is strange to take that out. And that's, to be fair, Bruckheimer and Fuqua were not happy about that. They really fought that, and it was Disney that just finally got their say and said, no, this has to be PG-13.
We did a test screening, and people wanted to see a wedding and a happy ending of some sort. And then we came up later with the concept of, well, maybe it should be Lancelot telling the story, so that then he lives on forever because you heard him telling you. So people weren't as depressed when they walked out of the theater. So we rearranged the ending and shot other things. I don't mind the ending now. I think it's a good ending. It's fine. I think we did a good job with the ending. I just think there's things about it that could have been more interesting if we would have stuck to a darker version. So I guess a wedding at the end of a movie after a battle and people dead all over the place is uplifting, I guess.
But at least they let Fuqua do his director's cut on the DVD. And even like on the DVD, he says, you know, this is still not exactly the cut I wanted because I was never really able to finish the cut I wanted. But at least I was able to put the violence back in and get this more in line with what I was initially aiming for. And I will say that definitely improves it. Now, I don't remember the theatrical cut enough to say if the extra 20 minutes of story improve anything.
Right.
And I will say, you said you stayed away from this. I know there's one moment that you saw that's not in the cut I saw. So they actually, in the director's cut, they also removed some scenes that Fuqua didn't really want in there. And these would be some of the scenes that were added in after test screenings for additional comedy. And there's a sequence, and I remember this from the theater, actually. The sequence where Bors, played by Ray Winstone, is talking about how he has so many kids, they don't have names, they just have numbers. That moment's not in the director's cut.
Oh, okay, that's funny.
You still get scenes with him and the kids, like him talking about how many kids he has, and the whole moment where Lancelot is joking around that the kids are actually his, you know. But that stuff, but the thing about the numbers is not in the version I saw.
I'm glad you brought up Bors right now, and I kind of want to stay here for just a slight second, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I think Ray Winstone is hilarious in this movie, and I think he's probably
great.
He's my favorite character of the whole movie.
Yeah,
like,
I think he's the MVP. Yeah,
yeah, he's. I mean, he always gives it his all. Like even when he was doing fucking Beowulf, you know what I mean? Like,
and I love Beowulf, by the way.
Yeah, and like I don't know if I can. I can't really remember it that much. I think I was. Yeah, I don't know, but regardless. Ray Winstone's awesome in this. He's super, super funny. It's weird that line was taken out of the director's cut because I thought that was great. There's an ongoing bit between him and Lancelot, played by Ian. You know what? Ian Gruffud. Okay, played by him, and like who fathers his children, like who actually got together with the lady. Which is kind of funny. But he also has these 3 lines that I really like. One of them, when he's talking about his kids, he calls them all bastards. So he's just like, come on, my other bastards. Like, he's like following. That's so funny.
There, yeah.
He also says this. He has 2 other really good lines I like. One is, rain is good. It washes all the blood away. That was super cool coming from him after a battle. And then this one made me laugh when he goes, when they're getting to the frozen lake and they have to decide to fight them. He goes, these Saxons are so close behind that my ass is hurting. And he's just, and like my delivery is terrible, right? And usually I drop in the clips, but this one just felt like I will just rattle them off. But he's really, really good in this.
I'll give you another good one. And it's very early on. It's after that caravan battle when the one character that they save is like really scared and he's praying. And Bors is like, does that work? And he starts like mocking him and doing like the fake praying. And he's just like, nothing seems to be happening. Like, yeah, he's hilarious in this.
Yeah, he's so good.
He's a scene stealer big time. But to be fair, as you said, they're all pretty great, right? Well, with the exception of maybe one that we'll talk about, but which is kind of another big issue with this movie. But that chemistry is established right away, and the thing is, they're all pretty funny, and like they really do feel like a group that's been together for 15 years. Like you are instantly like kind of connected to them as a group because they all have they already have inside jokes. They're all kind of bullshitting with each other. The same way like they're just busting balls with each other, and it's a very interesting take on the Knights. And this is the thing about. Okay, so let me just address this right now, so I can just say this and get this out of the way. I'm of 2 minds about the approach of this film because one of the things I oftentimes see people criticize about this movie is, honestly, a lot of the hate I see for this film is people who do not like that it's a King Arthur movie that removed all the magic. They say, like, what? This is not King Arthur. It's not King Arthur if you take out the mythological stuff. If Morgana Le Fay's not there, if his dad's not Uther Pendragon, if we don't have... We have a version of the Sword in the Stone, we'll talk about that, but if we don't have, like, the mystical element of it, if we don't have, like, him fighting monsters, then this is not King Arthur. And my response to that is kind of, that's what makes this movie interesting, right? We have, like, King Arthur is a character that's been done so much. Like, it's pretty cool to see a different take on it. That said, I've often told people, like, maybe the way to just enjoy this film, if that's a hang-up for you, is just don't think of it as King Arthur. Because you can just watch this as, like, a man on a mission movie. Like, it doesn't really matter if these characters are those characters. And in fact, as I was just saying, whereas the knights are always portrayed as so virtuous and just all about chivalry, they're all like drunken morons in this. And I think that's pretty fun, you know?
I couldn't agree more. And I love that you just said it's like a, men on a mission type of a movie, right? Like it is that one last job. It's and I already am so in for something like that. Like, oh, I gotta retire. I gotta go save this one kid, or else and I'll finally get my freedom. And I love that shit because people are gonna die and yada yada, and like the stakes are just heightened all of a sudden. I love that. I'm a sucker for it.
Yeah.
And we said before, which is interesting because Antoine Fuqua goes on to direct The Magnificent Seven, which is a retelling of the Seven Samurai, and this movie plays like Seven Samurai. Yeah. Like right away it does. It even has 7 of the characters, of the whole crew. They go protect a village. They go rescue somebody. You know what I mean? They have the last stand saving a village. It's a great, I guess trope would be the word I want to use here, but I'm so in for that type of story that I think going into this with my lack of knowledge of Arthurian legend, I just accepted it. Like you're saying, let the fictionalization of it or the different retelling of it wash over me. And that's why I think I just had a blast. Like I really did.
Yeah, and you really get the best of both worlds because so you make the knights a little bit more interesting by removing the pressure of them all having to be just so chivalrous.
Yes.
And these great people. So they're more compelling because they are just these kind of buffoons, but tough buffoons and buffoons with a real camaraderie that seems earned. But Arthur himself still feels very King Arthur-ish.
Yes.
And me, you Chris, from many discussions that I'm a sucker for this kind of hero in a film. A very virtuous hero. I'm a Superman kind of guy.
Yep.
So I love a moment where they explain why Arthur has the round table. And when they say he always says for men to be men, they must all be equal. So there should be no head of a table. You have the moment when they go to save that kid, the mission that they're on. And they get there and they find out that the kid's father, who's this kind of wealthy landowner lord, has this crypt, this tomb where he's walling up people that he considers heretics. And Arthur realizes that he hears them in there and frees them. And then you have that kind of great moment where the holy man who was in there with them says I was willing to die in there with them so that I could lead them to salvation. And Arthur just goes all right, well, I'll let you go to heaven, then wall them back up, takes out the people and walls up the people again. But that's pretty cold blooded, but for the right reason. Right. And I think you really buy him as this, I don't know how you felt about it, but this movie is all about how he's just a Roman soldier who in his mind, all he wants to do is get back to Rome because he thinks that the version of Rome that he hasn't been there in 15 years. And he thinks the version of Rome, or the version of Rome he remembers, is this place that was starting to get a little bit more liberal and a little bit more enlightened. And that's what he wants to go back to. And then he finds out that actually they've killed his father figure, his religious teacher, his philosophical teacher. And it's just all about answering to the church now. And in a very kind of negative way. Mm-hmm. And that sends him on a path of kind of turning against his Roman background and accepting his British half, which comes from his mother. And so this movie is about watching a Roman officer become King Arthur. And I bought that. I bought him as someone who everybody would get behind because he's constantly talking about how he wants everyone to be equal. You really buy that he cares so much about his men. I don't want to say it yet, but he has a great line at the end of the battle, which I just think sums up his character very well. And I don't know. I've seen people call Clive Owen very flat in this. I don't necessarily disagree, but I think he's flat in that good kind of traditional Hollywood classical way.
Well, you know what I said? I wrote down. Sorry, I'm just.
No, go ahead.
I'm so into what you're saying. I'm right there.
I don't want to rant too long. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and you will forever. But I said in my notes that I'm interested to find out how Arthur is usually portrayed in things because this one he's gruff, he's authoritative, but it's this understated, layered performance that you really get a sense that he's haunted by years of loss. Yeah. And he's kind of done with this shit, but also needs to prove a point. I really liked, you just mentioned the tomb scene where he saves Guinevere, actually. Mm-hmm. And that scene kind of tests his faith. And I loved seeing that this faith-based guy is now being wait a second. Everything I stand for, this is horrible. And I love that. There's also a...
Can I just interject really quickly there too? Because one of the things that's great about that too is, as you said, this movie is very much about how his battles with his own faith, but also speaking to his character is the fact that he is very religious, but he does not care at all that his knights are not.
Yes.
He just still thinks of them as equals and is just so on their side. And in fact, when the one kind of clerical guy says you haven't made your knights like convert to Christianity? And he just says like, no, they're good guys. Like, I know I trust them with my life. Like, what does it matter? You know, well, that's great. Yeah.
There's a scene that I really like. I'm gonna plop in here, but Guinevere's talking to Arthur, and she's kind of challenging him on who he stands for because he's both Roman and British. Sorry.
My father told me great tales of you.
Really? And what did you hear?
Fairy tales. The kind you hear about people so brave, so selfless that they can't be real. Arthur and his knights. A leader both Briton and Roman. And yet you chose your allegiance to Rome. To those who take what does not belong to them. That same Rome that took your men from their homeland.
Listen, lady. Do not pretend you know anything about me or my men.
How many Britons have you killed?
As many as tried to kill me. It's a natural state of any man to want to live.
Animals live. It's a natural state of any man to want to live free. In their own country. I belong to this man. Where do you belong, Arthur?
Yeah, that's a great scene. It's one of the better dialogue moments in the film, which has some shaky ones, but
sure. But that one is like it's so meaningful to hear. You know, he's being tested with his faith. What this woman that was locked up. You know, he saves her, and then she's telling him, "Yo, who do you stand for? Like, who are you gonna fight with? Like, and kind of just setting him straight." And I love seeing again. I like Clive Owen's performance because he is internalizing everything. So when I hear that most people were saying he's boring, I just think he's internalizing. You know, like he's a good leader in that way. You know, like he's not bombastic or loud or obnoxious. He's taking it in of everything that happens to him, and he's applying it to how he deems fit, I guess. I don't know. Like it's
and here's what I'll say, and I don't know if you agree, but I alluded to this earlier. So as I was watching this today, I was trying to think, okay, let me try and picture this movie with Daniel Craig in the lead. I like Daniel Craig. As we said, Daniel Craig went on to be a bigger star than Clive Owen. Clive Owen's kind of never had that like kind of, you know, big breakthrough. But I don't personally think Daniel Craig would have been as good in this role. Yeah. I don't know that Daniel Craig could have played that same kind of like interiority the way that Clive Owen does in this. I think it would have been, I don't know. I feel like Daniel Craig would have like latched onto just the gruffness or something, you know, or like would have had maybe too much of a twinkle in his eye, which this character shouldn't have, because that's all the knights, right? Like Arthur has to be different. He has to stand apart from them. And I think there's a part, I don't know why, it's hard to explain. But a part of me feels like Daniel Craig's Arthur would have felt like too much like one of the boys. Like I think he would have like been like more like part of the gang.
Yeah, in this one, there's a clear line drawn of who's leading these men, and you totally buy into when they're told that they have to go back on this one mission, and they are all like super fucking mad, right? Yeah, and like even Bors is like, Arthur, like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, no way are we gonna do this. And then all of a sudden, it's like, are you coming? And Boris is like, yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah, you know, and they're doing it just for him.
Yes, like, just for him, because they believe in this guy.
They're not doing it for Rome. They're like, fuck Rome. But if our commander, that's the thing is like that. If Arthur wants us to do it, and you go like, wow, these past 15 years, these guys have seen some shit, and every step of the way, Arthur was there for them. And the movie does like nice little details to elaborate that as well. I really love the moment where you first see the round table and there's so many empty chairs. And it's just telling you without telling you how many friends and fellow knights they've lost. And then there is a scene where they eventually go to the graveyard that they've built for the knights. And I love the visual of how all the graves just have the knights' swords as their tombstone. And you just see this field of swords in like the ground and just realizing, wow, these guys have lost so many friends and so many like compatriots. But they're so loyal to Arthur that clearly he's always been there. He's always been leading the charge, and he's always cared for them. And yeah, I think it just works really, really well. Yeah. So we talked about him. Let's talk about some of the other cast. We talked about Ray Winstone. Ray Stevenson is, you know, I like Ray Stevenson. I wouldn't say he's like a breakout in this or anything. He's kind of maybe the least memorable. They give him that nice little relationship with the small boy that they rescue. Which, by the way, I read that was supposed to be Guinevere's younger brother. I don't think the movie makes that very clear at all. No, I'd never read it that way. But I'll take this plot synopsis word for it. I thought they're all kind of funny, right? They all get good moments. You were talking about some of Ray Winstone's great lines. I love the moment. I hope it's in your cut when they're doing the throwing darts with the knives, and Tristan, Mads Mikkelsen, throws the knife right in the hilt of the other knife, and they're like, "How do you do that?" And his answer is just like, I aim right there for the middle." And I thought that's a really good, like, it's cool to see Mads Mikkelsen even get like some good zingers in this, you know.
Well, they even give great lines to Keira Knightley. Like there's the best. Yeah, this is the best line I think of the movie. This is right again. They are going to face off against the Saxons on this this ice covered lake, and it's very intimidating. It's basically a huge group of, like I said, Uruk-hai almost, like coming towards these only 7 guys and Keira Knightley.
Hold until I give the command.
You look frightened. There's a large number of lonely men out there.
Don't worry, I won't let them rape you.
Now that's a great line. That's an absolute great line, and I love the characterization of Guinevere in this movie. Again, I'm not familiar with the source material, but I like that she takes care of herself. She is what did I write down here? She's equal parts graceful and courageous, and I totally buy as a warrior.
Dude, this is another one where I feel like such a disconnect between my take and the take I see from a lot of other people online.
Okay.
I'll just, I'm not going to like name names or anything, but I was just like looking to see, like, remind myself of how people don't really like this film online and like why. And I saw somebody refer to Keira Knightley as Guinevere as a fuck puppet of a character. And boy, I'm just like, what movie are they watching? Because for a character that typically in the Arthurian legends is kind of just like the queen that ends up cuckolding Arthur, right? She's like Arthur's wife. She's very like, she seems virtuous at first, but she ends up in this, I don't know how much of this you know. You said you know a little bit of it, but she ends up in this like relationship with Lancelot. And that ultimately is like the beginning of the end for Arthur. That starts this chain of events that leads to him dying. And we'll get into like the movie's take on that. But yeah, there's, to me, I like Arthurian legend, but I've never felt like Guinevere is much of a character other than that. She's kind of like more of a plot device.
Right.
And I think this version of Guinevere, like you said, there's this like long-standing discussion now about strong female characters and how sometimes Hollywood does that in the most lazy ways. But I think this is like the best version of that, right?
Yeah.
You just like, you always buy this character as someone who could get through to Arthur. And then at the end, when we find out that she's a warrior too, I just instantly accept it. And the movie doesn't play it as like cutesy or anything. She knows her shit. She knows how to shoot that bow. She's great in combat. I love the moment in the final battle when she's fighting Till Schweiger's character, and she just seems like so feral.
Yeah.
She just goes completely feral, and she's like smiling as they fight.
And that's a testament again. Keira Knightley's awesome. Like people sleep on Keira Knightley a lot, and I think she is. That sounded bad, but you know what I mean.
I'd like to sleep on Keira Knightley.
Hey, okay, all right. At F2F Pod, all your questions, concerns, and complaints.
I respect you as a woman, Keira.
Yeah, but she is. She has a screen presence. Mm-hmm. She has a voice, a commanding voice. Even just like, I mean, the look of her. You know, you're just drawn in, obviously because she's beautiful, but just the way she gives shit to Jack Sparrow or Orlando Bloom's character, like you totally buy that this chick does not take any bullshit from from the dudes. You know what I mean? And in this one, it just was like she just fit in perfectly. Every time she talked to Arthur, you bought into it. He's internalizing what she's saying, and she could be one of the boys. But yet be, like I said before, sorry to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
But yet graceful. The scene when she pulls out the bow for the first time, and she's got like this flowy blue robe thing on, and she looks badass as hell, but so great, like an angel has appeared on the battlefield with these guys, these gross, grimy, dirty, scarred up motherfuckers. You know what I mean? And she just fits. And it's like, that's a testament to the filmmaking, a testament to her, the costume design, just the tone. I was really a big fan of Guinevere. Yeah,
and you mentioned earlier like how she can like look badass. let's talk about her like warrior look too, because this is the thing. Like, if this movie was like a bigger deal, that would be so much more iconic. Because, dude, she looks so awesome at the end of this movie. And like, one of the like long-standing kind of memories of this film for a lot of people, I think, is the controversy involving the poster for the film. So we can just address that right now. They actually photoshopped Keira Knightley on the poster to give her a larger chest, which was obviously stupid because, you know what, no one's ever been like, man, that Keira Knightley's hot, but she just doesn't have big enough boobs. It's just stupid Hollywood thinking. I know she was upset about it. It became a big thing. It's strange to me that they just like never fixed it even after she complained about it. But so that's unfortunate. But I would say like what's even more unfortunate to me is on that poster, not only did they like do the stupid photoshopping her chest, but why didn't they also show her in like the full blue with like the tribal markings on her? Because she just looks so awesome at the end of the movie. Like, it's just such an iconic look. And as you said, like, you see her and you're like, oh shit, that she could fuck me up. I'm pretty sure. Like, it's just so intense. Yeah. Can I
actually quote her a little bit and give her the word on that poster?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So this is from years ago. I don't exactly remember the year, but it was with Us Magazine. And this is Keira Knightley talking about why her breasts were enlarged in the U.S. theatrical film poster. "Those things certainly weren't mine," she told Us Magazine yesterday. "I remember we had an interesting discussion when they said, we want to make them slightly larger, and you'll get approval. And I was like, okay, fine. I honestly don't give a shit. But then they showed me the first copy, and these things must have been double E's, and they were down to my knees. And I was like, I don't mind you making them bigger, but don't give me droopy breasts. They look like your grandmother's tits." She then went on to say the incident was certainly not the first time she had her chest digitally enhanced. She explained, "I did one magazine and found out you're not actually allowed to be on a cover in the US without at least a C cup because it turns people off. Apparently they have done market research and found that women want to see no less than a C cup on other women. Isn't that crazy? So they made my tits bigger for that as well."
God, the ugliness of that. Just imagine like actually like having that job of having to go up to Keira Knightley and be like, "Hey, just so you know, can we talk to you about how we have to make your chest bigger on the poster?" Like, just so ridiculous, right? She's already a sex symbol. People know what she looks like.
Yeah,
we already love her as a performer and think she's beautiful. Oh God, it's so stupid.
Yeah, it's just one of those again, countless, endless, gross Hollywood bullshit stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. She's great. I'm just trying to tick through the boxes in here. I'm going to go to like the performance I'm not so hot on now so I can kind of come back around to some positives. And that is, unfortunately, I do think Ioan Gruffudd is kind of the weak link in this film as Lancelot. And I think that also, I mean, apparently I think you and I both kind of read that Lancelot was meant to be more of like the central figure in this story. It was really kind of more primarily from his perspective. And apparently in some test screenings, people weren't so hot on his character. And I don't want to, again, we don't like shitting on actors necessarily. I just think, what did you think of his performance in this? Because I don't want to say flat, but I thought he was going for like, I've seen him in other movies. He's not always like this. As Lancelot, he's going for this very theatrical, classical kind of performance. And it feels out of tune with everyone else. Like he's putting on a voice, right? And that's what like kind of ruins a lot of his scenes, I think.
This is what it is. Everybody is in a movie. He's in a play.
Yeah. And he's in like an old school, like British play, right? He's like, oh, this is my chance to play in King Arthur, and he's doing that kind of thing. Like, I am Lancelot. And it's like, that's not what everyone else is doing in this movie.
Yeah. Never ever do a British accent again, by the way.
I'm doing his bad acting. That's
okay. It was a save. It was a save. Now do your real one now.
What's all this then?
Oh God, we're canceled. In real time. It's just deleting off podcast apps right now. It's just like fuck, we're done. Anyway. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think he's just very big, but not big enough, but also he's just off everybody's wavelength. That's what I would say. He's just not. I feel like all the when he's like yelling at Arthur a couple times, I feel like Clive Owen was probably like, bro, tame that shit.
Yeah.
Like it felt like there was like this mental thing of Clive's like, yo, I'm doing a different thing than what this guy's doing right here. And you're right. They edited him out quite a bit. They added the monologues for him in the beginning. The narrations, in the beginning and end of the film. And the audiences right away, somebody
Yeah,
said a black hole of charisma.
yeah. They added the narration to kind of make up for some other stuff being taken out.
Yes.
It's strange too because cutting him down as a character, he's still there. I mean, he's still like the main other knight. He's kind of like the voice of, I don't want to say voice of conscience. He's like the main kind of person who disagrees with Arthur. But then when he comes around, that's meant to show us that the other knights will follow.
Mm-hmm.
But by cutting his role down, you do remove one of the most known elements of the King Arthur story, and that is the love triangle. And what's strange is that I don't know how much more it used to be in there, but they leave just enough of it in to make that seem odd in the film, right? Because she's always clearly into Arthur, Guinevere, but there are a couple scenes where she's pretty flirtatious with Lancelot, and we have scenes with Lancelot like watching her get like bathed, and him kind of seeming to have a crush on her. And then I guess we're getting into spoilery territory now, but when we get to like Lancelot's fate, she seems like very kind of struck by it, but I don't know, like because it's not as developed, it feels strange in this. Now, I don't mind that love triangle necessarily getting taken out, and I know you want to say something. Let me just say this, because this goes back to something you mentioned earlier, where you said you don't know too much about like how Arthur is typically portrayed. I will say, I think even more so than trying to say this is like the real Arthurian story and this is like the actual classical story, which obviously they were just bullshitting and don't care that much about. I think the real intention of this film was to return Arthur to his original inception in like the old school Arthurian legends. So in like the original Arthurian legends from like Geoffrey of Mormont, I'm probably not saying that right, but the one who the first person to start really cataloging Arthurian legends, Arthur was more of this like badass warrior who protected Britain against like dragons and monsters, and it was just like like the best like fighter, and that's like what Arthur was. And then as I said, as you get into like the 15th century and like, or even I think it starts in 12th century, but other people start coming in. French writers add in characters like Lancelot and start speaking more to like the chivalrous aspect of all this. Arthur starts to become more of like a supporting character in his own legends. And also, as I said, becomes a character that is mostly known now for being cuckolded by Lancelot.
Right.
And there are two kind of periods of Arthurian legend. One is like more warrior battle based, and then one is more romantic fantasy based. And I think this movie was really like, let's get back to Arthur being like a badass, and a badass is not going to have his woman taken from him by Lancelot. So I think the movie is just like, forget that, But I think they should have just like completely left it out then. What do you think?
I agree, because there's some weird editing moments that I knew there was a sex scene in this movie, and by all accounts, I was really thinking it was going to be between her and Lancelot. And especially for the one look of when she's getting bathed and he's like creeping her, but she's like sees him creeping and is like, yo, it's all good. You know what I mean? So it's like it felt like it was becoming at least like a lusty type of a relationship. It feels deleted. It feels like deleted scenes. So, but again, I am so fucking over love triangles. So I personally didn't feel like that was a negative at all. I was just like, I'm so done with two guys trying to fight over some chick. You know what I mean? And I think
it shouldn't be here. It shouldn't be here anyway, simply because this isn't like, the story of Lancelot and Guinevere hooking up and like betraying Arthur is after they've been together, right? It's like it's a story further along in the Arthurian legends. This is the story of him becoming King Arthur.
Yeah.
You don't want to like have his origin story be already that Guinevere is like, oh, but that other guy too,
Totally.
Like, no, like let's just get Arthur and Guinevere together.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of that, like kind of like you said, the eye fucking between Lancelot and Guinevere, I think if you just took it out, I think this movie would like work a little bit better. Not to try and cut more of Ioan Gruffudd out of this, but realize what's working and realize what's not, All right, and I just before we like stop talking about the cast, I don't think we can get out of this without talking about Stellan Skarsgård as bad guy, as Saxon leader. Okay, so we called him, a never bad, which we made up, and he like continuing that trend. He is awesome in this. I remember walking out of this in the theater, and that was the thing I was most taken with. This I was like, dude, that was such a cool villain performance because I love what he does in this, and that he plays this as someone who is just so bored with like conquering lands. Like he just couldn't care less anymore, but he just keeps doing it because it's all he knows. And he just gets it across. He never says that, But man, talk about being able to convey a lot in how you act, like your body language. When he talks to his son, he never even like makes eye contact with him. He's just like looking off in the distance. Like he's so like, oh, I've done this all, you know?
Totally.
I've like conquered every land. It's like, yeah, it's boring. And then that like turn when when him and Arthur have that confrontation and we actually hear him say like, finally a man worth killing.
It's
and you realize that's what that character is, right? Like he's just been waiting for finally someone to be his equal because he just sees everyone as like too easy to beat. And his own son's like a disappointment to him. Yeah, it's just great. Like I just thought he was awesome in this. Like, yeah, he doesn't. Like I said, I don't think they ever say his name, but like it doesn't even matter to me. He's still like a fairly iconic villain. I've one of the main things I've remembered about this movie is his performance.
Yeah, it's all in like his body language. It's right away. You know what this guy's gone through, what he's seen, and it's funny. Yeah, you're right. He seems like tired, and just kind of like, let's get this over with. And yeah, that's a great line when he says, "Finally, somebody that's worthy of this" or whatever. But it's I
mean, like sometimes I think you can see like little like improvs come in. There's the moment before the battle, the final battle, when he's like eating bread and he like takes some of the bread and offers it to his son, and it's like right before a cut. And I was like, oh, I bet you that's just something Skarsgård did, almost as like a goof, and they left it in.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, he's great. You nailed all the points. I would just be echoing it, but no, he's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great villain. Even like when he's fighting Mads Mikkelsen, and it just shows like his honor again, to where Mads Mikkelsen is like getting very like he's just destroying him. Mads Mikkelsen drops his sword. He could finish him, but instead he kicks the sword back to him. You know,
yeah,
gives
totally.
Him like one here's one last go for you if you want to take it. You know, yeah. So it's another standout in this. I wish I had more to say about Merlin, since Merlin is such a big part of Arthurian legend, but he's definitely a character that kind of gets like shortchanged in this a little bit. That's the thing. If you're going to sell your King Arthur movie as like, this is the non-magical take, what do you do with Merlin? I think you
make him hide in the woods and barely
talk. I think they figure out a clever way around it to where they like people think he's a dark magician. That's what they say about it. What we find out is it's really just that he's like figured out gunpowder, you know, like he's basically figured out explosives. So that's what makes people think he's like a sorcerer.
Right.
But really he's just kind of like the spiritual leader of the Woads. I think he has an interesting presence in his few scenes, but for a character that's like we often think of as like, you know, Arthur's like, you know, main advisor and, you know, this big magical guy. I don't know that I look at this version of Merlin and think like, wow, this is a relationship that is going to really bear that kind of fruit later.
No, I think if anything got shortchanged, it's that character almost in its entirety. Again, though, that's coming from like the one big knowledgeable thing I have about the property is Merlin. So when I barely knew it was him, they don't even say his name really. It's kind of up in the air.
Okay, and then let me ask you one last thing before we get out of here then, because it's an important thing for a movie like this, I think. What do you think of like Anton Fuqua's direction? You know, so coming into a movie like this, like obviously there's a huge step up for him in scale and everything, and like I've seen both kind of ends of the spectrum in terms of people talking about the battle scenes. We both said that I think we both love the ice scene. But the battle of Baden Hill, the big battle at the end, you know, you said obviously you were seeing a slightly neutered version of it, but how do you think it like kind of felt with like in, you know, he's not a Ridley Scott, right? What did you think of like his direction of, in particular, the action?
I thought the action was really, really great, minus the editing, honestly. Like I other than censoring the blood and gore, I thought it looked great. I really loved this. You never seen a battle, other than really Lord of the Rings, which I've mentioned already, you never see the soldiers or whatever tired. And in this movie, I felt like there was weight to every, you know, sword swing or shield or running or this. I felt like everybody was tired and exhausted by battle. And I really, really loved seeing that when there's just like just a weight to the violence. I understood where everybody was. I understood, you know, who was fighting who. I was never confused, you know, when our main actors were fighting with other main people. Like, it was... the one thing I will say is that Mads Mikkelsen and, I guess, Lancelot have two big moments. The other characters don't, really. And that did bother me, that I kind of wanted... I mean, it sounds so lazy, but I kind of wish I did have 7 or 8 different big moments. You know what I mean? And they just give it to 2, and that's it.
I think Galahad is like... Hugh Dancy kind of gets the worst of that. Like, he really has like nothing kind of memorable in this. Yeah. That's too bad, because we know Hugh Dancy is a great actor from Hannibal. You do watch this movie and really wish Galahad and Tristan had some scenes together, right? Just to like sell that like the fun connection a little bit more.
I don't kill for pleasure, unlike some.
Well, you should try someday. You might get a taste for it.
And with that clip, I think it's score whore time, and let's talk about our buddy Honey Zed.
Yeah, I think it's okay. So I don't know. Yeah. It's sometimes Hans Zimmer comes to play, and sometimes he goes full Zimmer.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get like, I don't know, maybe we need a term for this. Like maybe we can call these like Zimmies or something, where it's like, he's just like, you know what, I got a free afternoon, I'll give you a Zimmy. And it's like, it's kind of half speed Hans Zimmer a little bit. I think like the final theme that's playing as you like roll into the end credits, I think actually is quite stirring. But yeah, I don't know. It's pretty mid-level for Hans Zimmer, unfortunately.
Yeah, I felt it was kind of like the leftovers from Gladiator.
Probably, right?
And like maybe some stuff he was working on with Pirates going into the sequels. Yeah, like it was good. Like, don't get me wrong, the main theme is good, but it's not
a score you would throw on and like listen to.
No,
it's utilitarian. It serves its purpose in the film, but that's the most I can say about it.
But dependable. Like, I mean, again, Hans Zimmer, he's fucking one of the absolute greats. So
yeah. Well, you know what? Ultimately, maybe that's a good place because I think dependable is a good way to sum up this movie. I think, as I said, I think if you can like just get over the fact that it's a different kind of King Arthur movie, you're still getting a pretty effective, pretty entertaining, kind of epic sword men on a mission movie. And I really do like the characterization of Arthur. As I mentioned earlier, a line that I love at the end, which I think sums up his character really well. That is when, after the Battle of Baden Hill, we've been dancing around this, but obviously there's some losses. From what we've said, you can probably figure out who. Maybe I'll just keep being nebulous about it. But Arthur suffers some very big losses. And I love the moment where he looks at the remaining knights and says, "My brave knights, I have failed you. I neither took you off this island nor shared your fate." And I just think that's such a great way to sum up Arthur, where it's like, he's so sad that he didn't die if some of his men did. And you realize that over 15 years, how many times has he felt that, Yeah. And it's just like, again, like that's why you buy this guy as like somebody who would like, at that point, you understand why all the woads and all the remaining, Britons who would decide to stay behind would go, you know what, you're our king. We're just anointing you king. And the movie even sells it at the end, like they just do that without him even knowing they're going to. They're like, you're King Arthur now. And I love that. And I do think it's cool to see a movie play with like this like realistic take on it. I love the moment where they do the flashback to him as a kid. And we get like this movie's version of The Sword and the Stone, where it's really just like, as his village is being attacked, he goes to his dad's grave, and his dad, as we said, the tombstone for his dad is a sword, and he pulls that out of the grave, and that's the Sword and the Stone. I was like, that's cool.
Yeah,
this stuff is cool.
And it's like, it's not even like really meant as a big moment. You all know because you know the legend, but it's played so. I mean, subtle is not really the word, but I think you know what I'm getting at. But it's not a huge spotlight on it. And in a lesser film, which I'm sure we will watch next episode, I'm sure that moment is horrible. I've never seen it. I've never seen a clip from that movie, but I'm sure it's gonna suck.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is one that I think deserves another look from people.
I agree.
We're not, as I said, neither of us are saying it's great. It's got its flaws. One of the main characters is kind of like, a little weak, and it's got some silliness with like the historical stuff. Maybe it's a little long too, especially in the director's cut, but I like it. I'm just gonna say, damn it, this is a good movie.
Dude, I'm telling you, the first half of this, I was like, in my notes, I was like, is this like on the top of what we've done so far? And is this going to rival Dread? Is it going to pass the Dread test? Unfortunately, it doesn't pass the Dread test, but that doesn't mean it's bad. This movie is very, very, like, again, it's one sliver away from being great.
Yeah, it's entertaining. And if you like this cast, and if you don't, what the hell, dude? But
I know.
If you like this cast, check it out, because here they are all having fun, and it's just an interesting, look back at some of the early stuff.
But yeah, so definitely, listeners, give it a look if you haven't in a while or never have. Check it out. I watched it on Disney Plus. In Canada, it's a deal with Star, so we can watch it on Disney Plus. So
yeah,
it's there, but it is the theatrical cut.
Yeah, as I said, if you are going to check it out, try to get your hands on that director's cut, because like I said, it is 20 minutes longer, and you do get the full like violence, which this movie kind of does need.
So having said that, Trev, this movie does gangbusters. Let's say it makes a fucking $1 billion. You know, Clive Owen, you know, let's sign him for 6 King Arthur movies.
So who would do something as stupid as that to say, let's make 7 King Arthur movies? Well, nobody would do that.
Yeah. We'll see you in 2 weeks, listeners. But what do you want from this? Like, now there's certain characters. We're going to be still going to hide some characters that are not going to follow into the new, into the sequels, if there were any. So I personally, sorry, I asked you the question, but I'm going to answer it for myself first. I would want to see a prequel. I would like to see what's happening in the 15 years. I want to see, you can get all the cast back. You can have them form, like, I don't, mind you, 15 years prior, they were all 9 apparently. But do maybe a couple years before. A couple years before we see today. Mind you, we don't get Guinevere. I just realized that. Maybe I don't want a prequel.
Yeah, prequels are tough, right? Because like
They're
the
tough,
prequel,
right?
what
Yeah.
is you know all these characters are going to live. That's always my issue with prequels. You know, the stakes are a little removed.
Yeah. I guess I come back on that. I don't know if I want a prequel. You guys all just followed me in my I just worked this out with myself. Yeah, we'll do it live. But anyway, Trev, you take the floor.
Maybe if you're like, oh, a prequel, it shows how a 9-year-old boy turns into Clive Owen in 15 years, I guess. This is a tricky one because here's the thing. Like we said, we were just kind of speculating that they wanted to do sequels. I do think that this has been a huge hit. Clearly, that would have been a conversation. But you have, as the filmmakers, you've put yourself in an interesting conundrum now because you've made the realistic version of King Arthur. You've said this isn't the Arthurian legend as you know it. So can you bring in Morgana Le Fay, who is his like evil sister? Well, I don't know. He has no sister in this film. So I think you would want to also, again, you have removed an important element to going into the love triangle. God, people have totally figured this out by now, what we're talking about. But one person who's involved in the love triangle is not
Guinevere's
making it out of this
gone.
film.
She's dead.
No.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. She's
but you're obviously not going to do that, right? So I do think if you did a sequel, I would want to see this universe's version of Morgana Le Fay. I don't know what that would be. You'd have to come up with, like, if you have a non-magical Merlin, you got to think of, well, what's the non-sorceress version of her? And
maybe she tries to get with Guinevere, and now we're like a super progressive film now.
But and that's like that. There's probably is an interesting version of that. I'm sure, like some very talented writers could figure out like what is like the more realistic version of her, right? Like how do you, what do you do with that character? Is she not his sister anymore? Is she his sister from, I keep saying Morgana Le Fay. It's Morgan Le Fay or Morgana. But it's where does she come from? Is it a sister you didn't know about? I don't know. It might be cool. But yeah, it's a tricky one because there's other knights that aren't in this movie, like Bedivere and Kay are not in this. So you could have more knights still be added. You can build the cast out a little bit more. But, you could do your version of Gawain and the Green Knight, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. There's a lot they could do. I mean, again, I just it
does. I mean, for whatever that you say, like the movie ends in a very like sequel-y setup kind of way.
Oh, it does.
I mean,
it does.
We have like he's like the movie ends with him becoming king and like when seeing everyone like now bowing to him, and you used to be setting up like, ooh, what's the next adventure of him now protecting this kingdom he has just formed?
Totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would have. I mean, I would have been first in line to see King Arthur 2. I would have.
Well, clearly you wouldn't have been because you weren't even in line to see King Arthur.
Yeah, but the way sequels work nowadays, they come out 20 years later, and you know what
That's
I mean.
true,
And like,
yeah. Maybe it'll still happen.
Yeah, we'll get.
I'm pretty sure you can get. Clive Owen's free.
Oh my god. I think they all are. I mean, minus Mads. I think he's the only one that's like working like crazy. Respectfully.
I guess the last thing I want to say, Chris, is I have a question for you. And again, this kind of ties into like the thing we keep like kind of dancing around. Let me ask you this question: losing a best friend but gaining a Keira Knightley, fair trade? So I'll tell you what, Chris.
I would drop you like a hot potato.
I was gonna say I would sacrifice you in a second. I don't know.
I'm actually hiring a hitman right now, as we speak. Yeah, but and with that, listeners, this is part 1 of Arthurian April. Next episode is King Arthur: Legend of the Sword from 2017. We kind of alluded to that a couple times, so that'll be a first time watch, I think, for both of us. Question mark? Okay.
Yeah. No. Yep.
Cool. So I am looking forward to it, especially how different of a take it is from this. So that's what I think the contrast. So I be prepared, listeners, that we will contrast both, for better or for worse. But if you want to follow along with us, at F2F Pod on Twitter. That's at F2 the number 2 F Pod on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. Check the podcast app. The links are there. Please rate, review, whatever you do. That'd be cool. Give us a star rating. But definitely join the tribe and hit that subscribe. That'd be sweet. That's the best way. And just keep along on this this whatever we're doing. I was going to say journey, but I was like, I'm sitting in my office, staring at a computer screen after talking about a journey that King Arthur went on. You know what I mean? It's just a stupid word that people say.
We're just about these badass knights having these amazing adventures, and we're recording a freaking podcast.
We're two dopes.
Yeah, but super ripped dopes, as we said.
Oh yes. Let's go back to our 47 sets. Let's go. All right, thanks for listening.
Seriously, go online and look at most people fucking hate this movie. It's weird.
And that's the thing. I didn't get into it. I didn't write it. Mm-hmm. I didn't say it. But yeah, 31%. Get the fuck out of here. 31%.
And even when you go on Letterboxd, you'll just see people trashing it, and it's just strange. And like I said, usually it's oh, is this the fucking boring version of King Arthur where it's not even, and it's okay, first of all, who cares?
Yeah, the magic is gone, leaving a dreary generic action movie.
You have 20 other King Arthur movies to watch with the magic, so why not try something different?
Yeah, I agree.